These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Stuskit, and thank you very much for joining us today on Market Journal. We've got a lot in store for this week's show, including why wheat and alfalfa producers should be on the lookout right now for Army cutworms. Plus, senior analyst for Barchart, Darin Newsom. He'll be stopping by in a few moments to give us the latest when it comes to market trends. And as always, Eric Hunt is standing by with a look at the latest when it comes to weather. We've got all that and more coming up on today's broadcast, but let's begin right here. At the end of March, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, he visited the University of Nebraska at Omaha to engage in discussions about the future of agriculture. He met with ag producers, business owners, industry leaders, and university administrators from both the Lincoln and Omaha campuses. A major point of discussion for Secretary Vilsack during his visit included the slow yet steady loss of farms and farmland across the United States. In fact, he stated that since 1981, the U.S. has lost approximately 544,000 farms and roughly 155 million acres of land that was in farming that's no longer used in farming today. This poses the question, what do we do about more farms being consolidated into fewer hands, and how did we get to this point?
Several years ago, Secretary Perdue was in Wisconsin, and he was asked this question in the context of dairy operations. And his comment, which was quite true and quite honest, was, well, the system in America is such that you have to get big or you're probably going to have to get out. The problem with that prescription is that to get big, you have to have access to resources. You have to have access to income. Over the last 3 years, 4 years, we've seen record levels of farm income in the United States. In fact, the last 3 years of farm income have been the best 3 years in at least 50 years and arguably in the history of the country. Now, I'm pretty sure that if I went around and talked to Nebraska farmers and said that to them, they would look to me as if I was absolutely crazy, because that's not what they necessarily experienced on their individual farm. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that a lot of the farm income has been concentrated. In fact, if you took a look at the top 7% or so of farms, it would be roughly 150,000 farms out of 1.9 million or so. And those farms cumulatively collected somewhere between 85 and 89% of the income. That means that roughly 1.7 million or so of farms had to share somewhere between 11 and 15% of the income, which explains why nearly 50% of farms didn't make any money at all, and the other 40% or so made money, but the majority of money they made to support their families came from off-farm income. In fact, 88% of American farmers work off the farm or have off-farm income. So the question I pose today is, are we okay with a system that requires farmers to work multiple jobs? Or is there a better opportunity to ask the question, why is it that the farmer has to work 2 jobs? Why can't we make the farm generate more than one source of income?
To that point, Vilsack introduced programs and grants that the USDA intends to implement in order to expand economic opportunities for rural communities, as well as small and mid-sized farms across the Cornhusker State.
Today we're announcing 541 awards across 44 states of additional REAP funding $120 million of additional refunding. Here in Nebraska, we're awarding of that number 18 additional awards in Nebraska for wind projects, solar projects, for energy efficiency, coolers in grocery stores, a variety of and you'll hear it from some of the panel members today. All told, in Nebraska, we've done 190 of these grants in the last couple of years, about $15 million. This is going to allow farmers to reduce their costs, but it also allows farmers potentially to produce excess energy on their farm. The question is, what would they do with that excess energy? Well, we have a program called PACE and New Era. And the PACE program and the New Era program are aimed at RECs and municipal utilities. RECs and municipal utilities that are anxious to convert from fossil fuel generated power to renewable energy power. I think it's possible for farmers to work cooperatively with their neighbors to generate electricity that could help and assist their local REC in that conversion. And that creates, if you will, an energy economy, or an energy commodity, which is a new income source for farmers. So in the climate smart renewable energy portfolio opportunities, there are four significant opportunities for value-added or additional income.
Some exciting news there from the Secretary of Agriculture. Appreciate him making his stop up there in Omaha. And speaking of USDA, thought this is interesting, learned it during the week. Of course, USDA, they published the Census of Agriculture, and from that data, we learned that Cherry County remains as America's top beef cow county with more than 180,000 cows. It has nearly double the amount of cows compared to the second highest county, which also happens to be Holt County here in Nebraska. Some interesting tidbits there. From cows to corn now, it is that time of the year where we like to check in on what's happening out and about in the field. All field work has begun for many area producers. Some rain did slow them down in the middle of the week. That was the case for our first guest of the season, who I had the chance to visit with on Wednesday morning. Joining us now for our first In the Field update of 2024 is Minden, Nebraska farmer Dan Christensen. Dan, thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brad.
Well, you're not in the field, I guess, as our segment is called, because you got some rain midweek. Talk about how much rain you guys had near Minden.
Yeah, around the board, we probably had around a half inch to an inch. So, and it was a blessing. We have been very dry with all the wind. I think we've had 10 inches of wind, is what you'd call it, I guess, in perspective to that. So it's been very dry here. A lot of field work has been done. A lot of guys have gotten fertilizing done. Not too many planters have rolled yet, just besides trying to make sure everything works. So,
okay, let's go back to I guess the last growing season as you kind of wrapped up harvest. How were you guys sitting in terms of moisture? Was it a tough year on that front?
Yeah, it was. Harvest seemed to go pretty quick actually, just because we didn't have hardly any weather delays. Like I'd say the last 2 years for us have been pretty dry. I remember last planting season, it was hard to get stuff on the ground. I think in some spots you'll have that as well this year. I hope we're not planting next week because I hope it's raining. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so when it does come to planting here for the 2024 crop, where are you going to start in terms of corn versus soybeans?
Well, we'll probably have a planter rolling on both. Next week is kind of our first starting day for seed corn, so we'll probably do a little bit of beans and start into a seed corn.
It's interesting on the seed corn front. I don't know a ton about that, so help me understand a bit about the process when it comes to planting the seed corn. You got kind of a date and time that's you're instructed on that front?
Yeah, it's actually going to be a experience for us as well. This is our first growing season doing seed corn on our farm. They kind of have a date set in stone. Not necessarily rain nor shine, but they have a date set in stone with the male planting and the female planting. It'll be an experience for us as well.
Quite a few people, kind of the central part of the state, they'll call it, Dan, do grow seed corn. As it comes to adding that to your operation in 2024, what were some of the considerations you were factoring in there?
Well, obviously the market price of things, corn and soybeans and all that whippy. And then, I guess just that niche market, finding another niche to the farm. We've just been continuous corn and soybeans, and there is a benefit of doing seed on the economic side of things, but just to find that little niche that we can get ourselves into, I think goes a long ways.
I have to imagine that field work you referenced a minute or so ago is all but wrapped up at this point. What kind of fertilizer plant are most guys doing ahead of getting in the fields?
Sorry, what was that, Bryce?
Yeah, what kind of fertilizer in general do you guys do before getting into the fields for the spring planting, Dan?
Yeah, so we do side dress fertilizing with the Coulter rig, and then we do a lot of vertical tillage, mainly just to get rid of the trash and then have a nice seed bed. And then we have anywhere from sandy ground to heavy ground, so we kind of do no-till on the sand ground just so the erosion and everything like that. So
when you do get to planting, what's your favorite part to the planting season in the spring?
Honestly, I love listening to baseball. Husker baseball on the radio. It's probably the more fun thing about planting. It's just kind of nice to sit back and relax and figure out all the gizmo and gadgets again, because it's been a month or two.
Thanks to Dan for that update. Again, he farms near Minden, Nebraska. Certainly wish him and his crew a successful planting season this spring. Up next, let's talk about the latest activity when it comes to the grain market. Darin Newsom, Senior Barchart Analyst, is joining us today. Hey, Darin, thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on again, Bryce.
Hope you're having a good spring as we take a look at these markets. We begin in the corn market, and on Wednesday, you kind of summarized things saying the corn market might as well have been closed all day. That's kind of a blunt way to put things.
Yeah, it's going nowhere fast. I mean, there's a phrase I like out there. It's been used by a number of folks over the years, sharply sideways. And that just seems to be what corn's comfortable doing right now. It doesn't have any reason to go up, doesn't have any reason to go down as far as the old crop market goes. We've seen basis firm a little bit, but I mean, we still have ample supplies to meet demand. We just have merchandisers pushing the cash market a bit, knowing producers are going to get pretty busy out in the field, so they're not going to be delivering as much to town. So, I mean, most of the activity has been in the basis market. Futures just more than happy to go sideways right now.
Well, regular viewers know that we like to solicit questions here on the program. We had several of them come in, one on the soybean front, Darin. Somebody just asked, what's going on in the soybean market? Take a look at the chart, and it's kind of in that sideways trend, but generally trending lower. Your thoughts on soybeans?
Yeah, it was interesting. I posted a chart of the day on it Tuesday afternoon. And when I started writing my piece, I was talking about how the old crop market was still in an uptrend. But then as I took a closer look at the chart, I think you could actually make the argument that the market is still in a downtrend. And this fits with what we see in the National Soybean Index, which is the national average cash price. If we go back a year ago, it completed a technical pattern on its monthly close only chart, meaning its long-term downside target was 10.25. At Tuesday evening, the index was priced at $10.90. So, we've still got some room to go down in the cash market, and if that's the case, I think it bolsters the argument that old crop soybeans still look like they've got some room to go down.
I've got a question to ask you on the wheat front, but first, let's get your general thoughts on the wheat complex.
Wheat is all over the place right now. And I think as we look at what's been going on in the winter markets, particularly in the new crop future spreads, we're seeing the commercial side getting more bearish. And so the bottom line is they're growing more comfortable with 2024 production. Both hard red winter and soft red winter certainly ties into some of the rain events that have moved through, some more that are expected this upcoming weekend and early next week. So, we'll see how all that plays out. But right now, as we look, again, at the Kansas City and Chicago spreads, they're both covering bearish levels of calculated full commercial carry, and it just isn't going to allow these markets to move very much, to rally much. And anytime they do see attempted rallies, some buying interest come in, they're going to be met with pretty heavy selling.
Scott wrote in this week on the wheat front, looking at kind of the historical context, the last 10, 15 years of the wheat market here domestically. And he's curious your thoughts on where you see the U.S. as a wheat producer 10 to 15 years from now. Kind of a big picture question, Darin.
It is a big picture question, and if I go back 10, 15 years from previously, the idea was wheat was going to lose a lot of ground to corn. Everything was going to go into corn because that was about at the boom of the corn market. I guess that was almost 20 years ago now, but the ethanol demand. So if we go 10 years in the future, I think wheat's still going to be hanging on. I still don't think the U.S. is going to be planting as many acres. I think we're going to continue to see that decline. And the biggest thing is, then it's going to come down to where is their water? Is there going to be water to continue to support more corn and more soybeans? Are we going to see, if there's not enough for that, there's not going to be enough water for cotton. So that's going to be the one saving grace for the possibility of more wheat acres. But the problem is, the world just doesn't seem to want U.S. wheat supplies at this point, unless there's some sort of critical shortage around the world. They're just not interested in buying from the U.S.
Yeah, it's an interesting market to follow. Anything on the livestock front when it comes to hogs or cattle that's piqued your interest over the past week?
Yeah, I think what's really jumping out to me here is that there's a lot of inconsistencies on the commercial side, particularly in the live cattle. One day we see the commercials buying, we see the future spreads moving with nearby contracts gaining on deferreds, but they just can't keep it going consistently. And so, by the time we get to the next day or the close of the next day, that support has evaporated and been replaced with some pressure. So all of this kind of lends itself to the idea that the market is probably topped up here, and that the longer term trends are down, and we'll probably see these markets continue to go lower. I say probably because when it comes to cattle, sometimes you have to hedge your bets a bit. Fundamentally, they haven't changed all that much. There's still talk that, we've got tighter supplies. We still have good demand. We can see that in the boxed beef markets. But just from just the market overall just seems a bit top heavy up here. Seems like it has an easier time going down than up.
Darin, you're up in Omaha. I'm broadcasting from Lincoln. Feel the need to mention that because about a week or so ago, I guess probably more at this point, I could hear the groans and the sadness coming from your house as USDA came out with an announcement. The survey division saying they're going to stop several reports. Say that very sarcastically. I think all of our viewers know how you feel about USDA reports, but in particular, it seems like the folks in the cattle side of things were particularly disappointed about the July inventory report being discontinued. Tell us, why does that not matter?
Simply, all we have to do is look at the markets. I mean, let's look at what the June, August, October, December spreads are telling us. We can read everything we need to know about inventory there. If we combine that with what we can read in the feeder cattle spreads as well, in the feeder cattle markets. I mean, all of the information is in front of us. What we won't have is the made up numbers, because we all know those numbers aren't real. They just come up. Economists just come up with them from somewhere. So the numbers aren't real. But if we want to understand real supply and demand, real fundamentals, it's all right in front of us in the markets. We can look at basis. We can look at spreads. We can see how money flow is coming into or out of the market. And that's all we need to know. I mean, understanding imaginary numbers really doesn't do anybody any good. And so, all the hand wringing and rending of garments over the fact that USDA is going to drop some of these meaningless reports, I just don't get it. I just don't think they're that important to begin with.
Understand your perspective. That's why we have you on here, Darin, to get that. Few seconds left here. Let's just get your final thoughts. As we sit here, planting really going to be ramping up over the next week or two. Your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch the weather here. Obviously, here in mid-April, we are just now turning the corner into, these markets are weather derivatives. So certainly, I mean, almost every conversation from here on out through the summer is going to start and end with weather.
Thanks as always, Darin, for joining us here on the broadcast. Coming up next week, we'll be joined by Heather Ramsey with the ARC Group. Of course, you heard me ask Darin a few questions. Go ahead and email me your questions for Heather. Since 1988, the University of Nebraska Timmerman Feedlot Management Internship has been training between 5 to 10 interns each year. These interns, upon completing their undergraduate degrees, participate in 6 weeks of classroom discussions and hands-on experience at the UNL Beef Research Feedlot near Meat. Afterwards, they move to a host feedlot for the second phase of their internship. This program aims to cultivate the next generation of feedlot managers and employees. For more details on this program, check out the latest issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is time to get our weekly weather update now with Nebraska Extension Ag climatologist Eric Hunt. Eric, a bit of rain fell across the region, as I mentioned earlier here in the broadcast, but some producers are still wishing for a bit more. Have any more rain coming up in your forecast?
Well, thanks, Bryce. We do indeed have some precipitation forecast for most everybody in the state the next week to 10 days. We also have some warmer temperatures. So again, we are expecting temperatures to be consistently above normal for most of this next week, particularly Monday and then again later in the week. We are looking at a cold front moving through, though, Monday night and Tuesday morning, and that should bring some decent chances of moisture, particularly on the I-80 corridor out into the parts of the Sandhills. Exact amounts are probably a little bit hard to determine at this point, but I would guess a lot of places will get a quarter to half inch, maybe a little bit more. Then we should have a couple of days of sunny weather, drier conditions, and temperatures probably at least in the 70s for most everybody. But later in the week, we turn our attention toward another trough moving the southwestern United States. Now, this presence is pretty much a guarantee at this point, but how quickly it will eject out into the central U.S. is a little bit uncertain at this point. But I would say by the end of next week, there is a relatively good chance of there being some pretty decent chance of precipitation, also chances for severe weather, particularly central and eastern portions of the state. That should bring decent chances of moisture. So again, this is a probability of receiving 1 inch or more precipitation by the end of next weekend. So very good chances across north central, northeastern, and eastern Nebraska, and even some chances of this getting some decent moisture across parts of southwestern Nebraska where we could really absolutely use it at this point. CPC is relatively bullish on moisture across a very good portion of the U.S. They are also pretty bullish on it being warm later in the month. Again, I think this generally is going to come to fruition, but there's probably going to be a day or two in here toward the end of the month, maybe the first part of May, where it will be a little bit cooler. In terms of recent precipitation, again, most of the state did pick up some decent precipitation amounts last week, particularly here across northeastern Nebraska, where some places had over 4 inches of rain. Our highest total was in western Wayne County with just under 5 inches this week. Where we did miss out, though, was in the far southwestern corner of the state, where we did see some degradation on the drought monitor. More on that here in just a second. We also had some severe weather reports. On Monday, we had a couple tornadoes in Webster County, also some wind reports in other parts of central Nebraska. Then on Tuesday, we had a couple tornadoes in Platte and Colfax counties. Soil temperatures right now generally are in the mid-50s to low 60s across the state. Now, again, these will be coming down later this week with the cooler temperatures that we are expecting at the end of this week. In terms of drought monitor, we did see a little bit of expansion of D0 into Hitchcock and Dundee counties. And one of the reasons for that is just, again, this persistent area of just low soil moisture percentiles. Again, now this was before we started getting some rain Thursday morning in parts of southeastern Nebraska. But even with the rain that we did get across east central Nebraska, we didn't really make much improvement in terms of our soil moisture percentiles. So we definitely need more moisture to get in the ground before we head into summer in this part of the state. Generally good across the northern part of the state. And again, we did see some decent improvement here across northeastern Nebraska, where now we're quite wet. Another reason we are seeing the degradation, we are seeing some stress on vegetation, particularly in the rangelands here across parts of Chase and Dundee counties. Again, another reason we saw the expansion of D0 in that area. And also just want to point out that the North American Drought Monitor was released recently. Again, a lot of Canada and a lot of Mexico and the southwestern U.S. is in drought, and that is expected to maybe expand northward in the next couple of months. Thanks, and back to you, Bryce.
Thanks very much for that information, Eric. While many are focused on insect management ahead of the upcoming planting season, it is important to note that some pests are already emerging in wheat and alfalfa fields. Army cutworms have been spotted in southern Sioux County and central Lincoln County. But as we progress further into spring, you do want to note this. These pests may be spreading to surrounding areas. That's why wheat and alfalfa producers are being urged right now to be scouting their fields. For more details, let's turn to Market Journal's Mike Straub.
With the recent nice warm weather in western Nebraska, Army cutworms have been spotted in southern Sioux City and central Lincoln County. With spring approaching, this pest may be seen in Nebraska crop fields soon. Because Army cutworms overwinter in Nebraska as larvae in the soil, they are one of the first caterpillars to be seen in the spring.
One important thing is that it does overwinter as a caterpillar, so it is one of the first caterpillars that are active in the springtime, coming out and starting to feed as we're getting a little bit of this warmer weather. We have had some reports from southwest and panhandle of Nebraska. That's typically where we do see the highest infestations. We're also seeing some reports out of western Kansas right now. So they're going to be feeding on the winter wheat and alfalfa as it's really, starting to be growing this spring. And that feeding damage can lead to economic damage. If you're at 4 caterpillars per square foot in a normal crop, and even just 2 caterpillars per square foot if your winter wheat maybe has some winter stress, or if your alfalfa stand is just establishing. The Army cutworm actually is not a pest in corn. So we do have a whole other variety of cutworm species that are a problem in seedling corn, like black cutworm, pale western cutworm. There's sort of a variety of them. But this one, we're really focused on winter wheat and alfalfa.
As we continue into early spring and wheat breaks dormancy, this would be a good time to scout for cutworm activity. Larvae are greenish-brown to greenish-gray caterpillars, approximately 1/2 to 2 inches in length.
Right now is a great time to get out and start scouting. We're warming up. The caterpillars are getting active. They're going to be feeding. One thing I actually look for is bird activity in fields. If you're seeing blackbirds and robins feeding in those crop fields, they may be attracted because of the caterpillars. So that could be an area to focus to first scout. But when you're also scouting, you need to be cautious to really look underneath of clods of dirt, crop residue, because they are nocturnal, and during the day they'll really be hiding where it's where there's more moisture and it's a little darker. The caterpillar overall has sort of a greenish brown color to it, and it has stripes kind of down the length of the body. They are going to be about 2 inches, 2.5 inches long when they're full grown, but you're likely to see kind of a variety of sizes right now.
If Army cutworm counts are above the recommended threshold, consider an insecticide application. Other important factors to consider before making a treatment decision include the crop yield potential and cost of control, as well as the size of the larva.
We do have published in our Crop Watch article and in our weed and insecticide guide quite a variety of different products that are registered for Army cutworm. Just be aware, of course, that your crop is on that label and any kind of pre-harvest intervals that you need to be aware of.
Army cutworms can be a devastating pest for winter wheat and alfalfa. Because some have been spotted recently, scouting for them now is highly recommended. Be sure to consider using treatment threshold of 4 or more cutworm larvae per square foot of winter wheat or alfalfa when considering insecticide treatment. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Thanks for that information, Mike. Now, if you'd like to learn more with Julie on this topic, we'll be sure to add a direct link to her Crop Watch article along with this story. Find that over on the Market Journal website. That about wraps up this week's show. Now, if you did miss one of our stories, be sure you're following along with Market Journal on our YouTube page and, of course, on social media to stay connected throughout the week. Also, for an alternative way to tune in, you can always visit us online at watchacrestv.com. Be sure to download Acres TV to your smart TV. Thanks for joining us this week. Look forward to having you with us next week. But until then, I'm Bryce Tuskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.